Jalen Nailor is stacking day after day after day, successful in camp. Is the hype real? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. Hey, if you are new here, welcome in. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is any audio listening app, just search out Locked On Vikings. That includes SiriusXM, where you'll be able to hear live hometown broadcasts on the Sirius networks right there on the SiriusXM app. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Pretty much the same thing as we did yesterday. We're just keeping you up to date on camp. I got Tyler back in here. We're going to talk about Jalen Nailor. We're going to talk about Fabian Moreau, a little bit of quarterback talk. There's a lot to get to, so let's not waste any more time. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Luke. Good to be back.
Yeah, welcome back in. Camp correspondent, unofficially, for Locked On Vikings this year. Pads on today instead of the shells, but it seems like the same narratives are perpetuating. You had more interesting stuff with McCarthy and Darnold. Maybe we'll get to that if we have time, but I actually wanted to kind of take our eyes off of that for a second, because that's been this, like, all the show has talked about for like all week. Because there's another, like, maybe the outside of the quarterbacks, the biggest story of camp, the biggest, I don't even want to say surprise result, but the most visceral one is Jalen Nailor seems to be popping off every single day. Is that just because he has a highlight someone tweets every day, or is it sustained, open all the time? Is he really having that kind of year?
He is having, like, if I were to compare it, similar to like KJ Osborne 2021, where it's just like,
oh, wow,
this dude is standing out and he's making plays on all three levels of the field. He's gaining quite a bit of separation, whether it be against the twos or the ones, because they've been kind of rotating. They've been playing a lot ones versus twos and 11 on 11s, and
always
ones v ones and 7 on 7. But they did have some reps against 1v1 when they did 2-minute drill, and Nailor was able to get open deep. Darnold just missed him, but I think that's more of a chemistry thing than oopsie. And yeah, Nailor's just been explosive. He's catching everything. He's making tough catches. He's making highlight reel ones, and he's gaining separation against whoever he's opposite of. And I don't know what that means once we get on the field in September, but it's a great sign.
Yeah, speedy, man. I mean, he's been catching the bombs too. It's like this deep threat, take the top off everything. Really stress those safeties. Jordan Addison on the posts, and then you can have a deep over from Justin Jefferson running, catching 30-yard passes with the safeties totally uncorked. That sounds awesome. So it sounds like he's currently splitting between first and second team with Brandon Powell. Powell, obviously, he's got his special teams role and stuff, so it's not like I think either of these guys are roster locks, right? And it's just kind of 3 versus 4. How has Brandon Powell looked? He was kind of the stud of camp last year. Maybe he's getting overshadowed, but is he just kind of going through the motions here? Is he doing fine, or is there anything noteworthy there either?
So you and I loved Brandon Powell's camp last year, and I don't think it's quite as good as what last year's was, but we're seeing some of the same things. I'm seeing him make all the catches, utilize really good hands, and extend outside his body for a couple. And it's unfortunate because Powell has had a good camp, but Nailor has the highlights. He's got the publicity, and I think that's overshadowing him to an extent. I don't know per se if Nailor's done enough to take the wide receiver 3 job from Brandon Powell, because my belief is that he went into camp with the wide receiver 3 job and he needed to be usurped. But it's made for a really, really interesting battle. And right now, I would kind of put it as, what does Kevin O'Connell want to do? And that's who gets in the game.
I'm sure you'll see plenty of both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, one of the Twitter Tuesday questions that I get a lot is about well, what if will they bring in a receiver, right? There was all this talk like before Odell signed with the Dolphins. Hey, what about Odell Beckham? What about, trading for T Higgins or whatever, depending on what the contract stuff was going on? Like, what about bringing someone in? And I kind of said like, look, it's a rotational role. They've got kind of bigger emergencies on defense. If we're going to talk about, acquisitions, and we'll get to that, by the way. And like I didn't anticipate them bringing anybody in to be any sort of serious challenger to the depth here. They've got Sherfield, they've got Nailor, they've got Powell, and we just kind of hope one of them emerges. Sounds like we're getting that. But is that still the case? Like, do we feel good about this now, or are we still like scouring people's depth charts, wondering who's wide receiver 6 we can poach off of waivers?
I think the weird thing about this Vikings depth chart is they probably have about 5 or 6 guys I'd feel comfortable as like wide receiver 5 or 6. And I think that kind of depth is really nice to have. So unless you get a dynamite player to be your wide receiver 3, somebody who like maybe you make a splash trade because somebody becomes available and then you bump Addison down to wide receiver 3 and you're just like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just give McCarthy another weapon. I don't see them making a move unless somebody becomes available that you were just absolutely floored by. And I don't see that happening. Like, I think the in-house options are solid enough. Now, do you maybe prioritize that in the draft next year? I think I can make that argument. But right now,
prioritize. I think maybe draft one, but you got to understand that this guy is depth. You're not taking depth in the first round because, and I guess maybe the next thing, Addison feels like he is absolutely nuclear. Like we mentioned it yesterday, but from the clips that I have seen, he said he'd been working on his releases in the offseason. I see evidence of that. We saw him burn Andrew Booth a couple times, and we went, well, maybe Andrew, but now I saw him burn Byron Murphy. It feels like he has taken a step forward to not just be a little complimentary piece that maybe we bump down to wide receiver 3 if we get someone. It seems like he's a serious receiver. And just the only thing preventing him from being a wide receiver 1 is that he shares a team with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I kind of relate what Jordan Addison's dealing with to Devontae Smith in Philadelphia. Devontae Smith could be their wide receiver 1, but they have A.J. Brown, and he just won't usurp that spot. Addison just moves differently. Without Justin Jefferson on the field on Wednesday because it was a planned rest day, he just looked head and shoulders better than everybody else on the offense.
And that's the thing, like, even if they're mad about him about the off field, which I think they've had that discussion, and I don't think the team will do anything beyond what the NFL itself will do. They'll just defer that to the Shield. But like people talking about what about benching him, what about cutting him or whatever, it's like, no, they're not going to do that. He's too good. Maybe you don't think that things should be that way, but they are. He's too good for them to take it as seriously as you want them to. Be as mad about that as you want. But I don't know. It would be cutting off your nose to spite your face in a certain sense, because if they did do anything with that, I mean, so many teams would line up to get that guy. He is, I see stud coming up. Like I see bona fide stud. The only thing preventing him from being, a true blue fantasy win your week kind of guy is sharing, being in a market share with JJ. And that improvement, that second year improvement is maybe what we thought we were seeing from Nailor last year, but then he got hurt.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I continue to find interesting is when they're doing punt return drills, it's Powell and Addison every time. And sometimes over the last 2 days, they're mixing other people in. I don't think it's as simple as, hey, just go catch punts because, we don't really have anything else to do. It feels like that they're going to consider actually using Addison on punt returns because
he's electric.
He is electric. And I think that's worth mentioning because he did return punts at Pitt. I don't believe he did so at USC, and he was pretty good at it too.
Yeah, you got to catch him clean, and that's what Brandon Powell does every single time. Like that's what I would always watch. So when I would go to camp, the last few years, my dad would always find a way to come along with one. And he would always watch the punt returners because that's what he did in high school. He would always watch the punt returners, and he would, without fail, he'd be able to tell you who was getting the job after one rep of all of them. Because you'd always have and it was Cheryl's, right? And like without fail, he would be able to be like, oh, nope, not the year that Cheryl's gets usurped. Because like without fail, Cheryl's would catch every single one of them soft and easy. And then you'd have like 3 other guys trying to take his job, and everyone would write an article about, is this finally the year the cockroach goes down and we get a roster spot back that was not just a special teamer? Same conversation we're having with Longwu, same conversation. I mean, Najee Thompson's hurt, so it's different, but same conversation with all these guys. And it's like always wrong because if you put in a guy that even though he catches it, if it bobbles at all, can't do it, can't trust you.
Yep.
And Powell was by far the cleanest last year. And by the way, Addison was in that group and he muffed a couple and he got taken out of the rotation. So we'll see if that sustains, but you've got a lot of camp to go without messing one up. And he didn't make it last year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I will say, you mentioned Longwu. I think we're going to have a fun discussion about this new kickoff rule. And if Wong was going to be the kickoff guy, it sounds like they want him to be. But I think after the first preseason game, how that approach is actually going to look, I'm really intrigued to see if he is going to be the guy.
I'm sure like somehow like a metagame will develop, but nobody knows what it is yet.
That's
so,
what I mean.
Maybe we have this conversation next year, but by then he's in year 4 and it's like, well, like his rookie contract is going to expire before we actually figure out that, what exactly kind of guy we want back for those. But I actually want to flip over to defense next because the corner room just keeps getting more interesting. And now Fabian Moreau is in there. I want to ask you about him and how everybody else is doing. So we will go defense next. Back with Tyler in a second. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets. Last-minute deals that save you up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. Whether it's a baseball game, just trying to say, hey, it's a Saturday, we got some time, let's go to a Twins game, but you don't have any tickets, check out Gametime. You might find a really, really nice deal there. They've got their flash deals at the top of the app as well if you're just looking for a reason to go do something, because you can get a great deal on some tickets. If you're open-minded enough, just go get whatever the flash deal in your area is. Or if you're looking to plan ahead for Vikings games, you can buy tickets way ahead of time as well and plan it like normal on Gametime, and you're still going to be able to find some pretty cool deals. If you find the same section and row somewhere else for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out here on Locked On Vikings, here with Tyler Forness, who has been helping out with camp reports and giving me the good old play-by-play. Next thing is that I wanted to get into is maybe the headline on the defense, which is Fabian Moreau. He comes in as maybe the most serious defensive back they got. They brought in Bobby McCain as well, who has lots of starting experience, who's a veteran. But he is playing safety right now. Maybe they'll mix him in at corner later, but not right now. But Fabian Moreau comes in instantly first-team corner. No Shaq Griffin, so I don't know if that stays when Shaq Griffin is back. Anticipated to be back like maybe after a week or so. He's week to week. He's probably back. Probably wouldn't play any preseason anyways, so we'll see him week 1. But for the time being, first-team corner with Caleb Evans as the other corner, and then Byron Murphy inside. How's the guy doing? How's the new guy doing? One day.
Considering he got off the plane either late last night or this morning, really, really good. He showed out today, and he was all over the ball. He was making some pass breakups. He did get beaten, but considering he was on the first team defense, that one says a lot about Moreau, who was a third round.
He got burned one time. You meant. Yeah. Well, just the one play. Yeah.
He lost the rep. Who cares? Everybody loses a rep, and I think if anybody's going to lose a rep, we're going to let the guy slide who just got off the plane.
Right. You're still talking about assignments and stuff. And
yeah, it was really impressive to see that he just stepped right in, pro's pro, and just played well. It didn't really have to. If he would have been okay, I don't think anybody really would have worried. I think if he was rough, I don't think anybody would have been too concerned because he just got off the plane, but he showed out. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to be a trend. Because, I mean, he has played, this will be his 5th team in 5 years. But Moreau, who was a legend on my Madden 20 Washington football team rebuild, he's actually pretty good. He's just a solid player, like a B- corner.
Yeah,
You like
that's the
those.
thing. Those guys get to a certain point in their career where everyone has figured out how to upgrade on them, and then suddenly they're not in as high of demand.
Mhm.
But when you're in the situation that the Vikings are in, I guess you'll take that kind of guy. So he's maybe figuring to start. And then the interesting thing will be when Shaq Griffin does come back to the rotation, who does go back down to the twos? Is it going to be Moreau? Is it going to be a Caleb Evans or whatever? We talked a lot about Andrew Booth struggling and how maybe that's getting overplayed, but I haven't asked you about any of the other guys in that secondary. I mean, I saw like Dwight McGlothern made one good play, but that's kind of all I could see about him. I would love to know a little more about how like a Caleb's doing. Cause there's still so many different permutations that could take. Like I could see honestly anybody getting moved to the bench on that group, save Byron Murphy.
Yeah.
So who are the standouts right now?
Can Theo Jackson play corner? Because he may have been the best player on defense yesterday.
This guy is like exploding. Hello.
I want to know if we can just start 4 safeties, because this guy should be a starter. He is playing that well. And he almost had an interception today. He had a couple good pass breakups. He's just all over the field. I don't know what the Vikings saw in him when they picked him up as a waiver wire pickup in 2022, but they were right. He's
probably wanted to draft him in the 6th, but yeah,
he's been really, really good. And I'd say the other one, like Evans, has been good. I was really impressed with a red zone rep. He got beaten off the line, and it was from like the 5-yard line. He flipped his hips and watched and waited. I think it was Jalen Nailor for him to make his break, and then was all over him.
That's good. Turned out of phase technique.
Yep,
that's what you want. You basically, you want to make them declare their thing, because if you get out of phase, which means you're no longer like hip to hip with them, and then they also like break their route off in a way that like jukes you and gets you to go, like you're getting absolutely smoked. I saw actually Addison got one like that on. I couldn't actually tell who the corner was a couple of days ago, and there was a clip of that, and it was just like absolutely like wide open, nobody within a zip code of him. But that kind of out of phase play is really important if you want to play a little more aggressively, if you want to jam more, if you want to maybe not give so much cushion on your off alignments. You're going to be out of phase sometimes. Like you're taking that risk, you're going to get burned on it sometimes. But being able to make that play out of phase and make it so it doesn't actually turn into a successful throw is a really important part of that skill that requires you to kind of be okay with losing part of the rep sometimes so you can come back and win it later.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you'll really appreciate, Luke, is he was not late to turn his head and was able to attack the football in the air. It was an incomplete pass. So that was something that he struggled a lot with coming out of college. And I know he's had some struggles.
It's really tough out of phase. Out of phase, sometimes some coaches won't even ask you to turn your head. They'll just say, watch the eyes, watch the hands go up. When the hands go up, your hand goes up and you just try to make a play when you're out of phase. But in the red zone, I guess you have the because the space is compressed, you have the time to catch up, and then you can kind of become back in phase. And now you're in phase technique, which is turn your head, eye on the ball, make a play.
Yeah. Like we talked about yesterday, it just feels like watching a Caleb on the field. It feels like if he was struggling mentally last year, that's gone. It feels more confident from him in how he's attacking, how he's moving around, how he's seeing the field. And I think that's a huge benefit for the Vikings, because he started the entire year last year. Like they trusted him enough to be the guy opposite of Byron Murphy for 16 games? That's pretty good.
I mean, he earned that, yeah. And he was playing fine for most of that. He was actually having a pretty good year. I hope we can kind of see him get out of that funk that was at the end of the year. But we do have a couple of minutes before I'm going to let you go here. I can't resist it anymore. Let's go back to the QB thing. Speaking of the interceptions, who's throwing these interceptions? Like, are we just throwing picks everywhere? Because it feels like Theo Jackson gets 2 a game or 2 a practice. Cam Bynum gets 2 a practice. Harrison Smith gets his hand on one. Like, who's throwing all these picks?
I can tell you this. It is not my boy, Jaron Hall. Jaron Hall is throwing.
Well, is he throwing it all?
Actually, they got him and Mullins some reps in team.
Okay.
And Mullins did, I believe, throw the almost pick to Theo Jackson. He was just Nick Mullins. Like,
yeah, that's what it's going to come down to with those two is like
Mhm.
I've said this on the show before too, like like a Mullins catastrophe, Mullins meltdown patented in a preseason game. You would come in the fourth quarter and throw like 2 interceptions in 2 drives and then he'll get hammered. And that's the way that Jaren Hall makes the team. And Hall needs to like make good on whatever reps he gets too, but very much behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, it's that the defense is just, they're just really good right now. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Because it's not the vibe you get off the secondary. Like it just, but they're doing a lot of red zone stuff. So a lot of, McCarthy threw a touchdown too, blah, blah, blah. It's like it started on the 5. Like it's a red zone drill. But
it's
okay.
It's also McCarthy, like with some of these drills too, McCarthy is waiting 6 seconds to throw some of these footballs. They're not
right.
Immediate.
That's the other thing. And it looks like Darnold's a little slow on it too. So especially in the 7-ons where there's no pressure or whatever, like taking your progressions that slowly is an unacceptable place to be if you had to start right now. It's part of the process. It's this is the moment in the learning curve that we are at. So it's not like a reason to panic or anything like that. It's a step, but it is very clear that like for me, the slowness at which McCarthy is going through his reads is the thing that if I were the coach is I can't put you in right now.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things with McCarthy is the wild plays are great. And we talked about it yesterday. Get excited about them. But some of the why behind the wild plays, hey, he would have already been sacked before he made a couple of these throws. He's waiting 5 or 6 seconds before throwing in the red zone. You can't do those things in a real game situation. Now he's still making the decision and he's still making the throw. Those are great. But now you got to speed it up. And we talked about that. You got to speed it up. And the big
and that's
thing with
part
Darnold,
of learning. Yeah. Like if you've ever had to learn a new technique for something, you do it slowly and then you speed it up. Like that's definitely part of it. And then real quick, one last thing with Darnold, because there have been some misses. You have a theory.
Yep.
I want to hear about it.
My theory is it's a chemistry thing where he just does not have a built-in chemistry with these guys yet because these misses are small. If you know that your receiver is going to run a 12-yard dig route, maybe Jalen Nailor cuts it off exactly at 12, cuts it 90 degrees, and you're good. Maybe Addison cuts it at 11 and has more of a speed run, and then he kind of rounds up north towards 13 before coming back in. Like everybody has different plateaus, different benchmarks in how they like to run, and understanding those and the speed in which they utilize on the field.
It's just different gates too. Like, like what 3 steps is for somebody or what 2 steps is for somebody versus what it was for Jawan Jennings. And what's the SMU guy I was in love with? Danny Gray. And like guys he would have been throwing to in San Francisco. It's different to get used to. So that totally makes sense to me. And again, second padded practice here. It's not even in August. Well, it will be when this goes up, but it's not like it's, long way to go and lots of time to iron that stuff out. But those are the things you want to be talking about right now, where we're ironing out the kinks. We're getting the details down rather than like looking at over in New England where they're going, oh my God, can anything not be a disaster right now? Like we're talking about, speed, you're doing it right, but do it faster or change this little detail or this little, this little nitpick. I feel really good about being there on July 31st.
Me too. And like one of the misses with Darnold when it was a scramble drill and he just misjudged how fast Brandon Powell is going to get to a spot. That's going to get ironed out. And I'm not really concerned about it.
You get used to that. That's what these practices are for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also doesn't help that JJ wasn't in there either. So that matters when you're talking about the first team.
Yeah. Well, we will keep this going, Tyler. This is not the last Locked On Vikings listeners and viewers are going to see of you. So thank you so much for hanging out. I think big announcement's coming up, right?
Big announcement is this morning, Luke.
It already came out. Let's go.
Yeah,
well, let's, because I don't know what time people are going to hear this, so we'll hold off.
Okay.
But we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks again to Tyler. We'll move on in a moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, it's hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. There is something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So whether you are going to go gamble on like an Olympics prop or some WNBA futures stuff, I know they're all on break right now for the Olympics, but when it comes back, baseball home run props, or even NFL futures like Justin Jefferson over under 1,300.5 yards. If it were me, I'd be slamming that over. You do you. Whatever it is that you find on FanDuel, go check it out every day. Like just go back to the website every once in a while. You will find new boosts and bonuses and all kinds of stuff all over the place. Once again, that is FanDuel. Make every moment more. So I wanted to circle back on the Fabian Moreau stuff we talked about, because we never really got to Fabian Moreau, who is, I think, actually a fairly important acquisition. That is definitely not a name that was on my radar, but he has a lot of starting experience. And as a corner stylistically, like he gets with the ones, and I'm like, okay, this is not just a camp dude. I think Fabian Moreau is like here and intended to play. So I think this is your cornerback Band-Aid, right? And I don't know if that's the most exciting name. I don't think there's like an exciting name. Like there are names like Stephon Gilmore and Xavier Howard, but like at least Fabian Moreau, he's 30 years old. He's a little long in the tooth, but he's not like full on pulled brisket like somebody like Xavier Howard is. And so Fabian Moreau, what you got to know about him, I guess, I didn't like take the longest look that I would have if he signed in March. But on a cursory look, a quick browse through the PFF page, here's, and a few clips that I could find here or there. Here's what I notice. A lot of his best highlights, which is what you get when you do the fast look, you get the good plays. A lot of his highlights are press man, sticky man coverage reps. Get that PBU right, get in the guy's face, jump the out route, that kind of thing. And a lot of it comes in press. He likes to be in press, I think, and he likes to play a little physical, because the other thing that is, I think, important to know about Moreau is that we've got a penalties issue. Famously in 2021, among cornerbacks, he was second in the league in penalties, got 11 penalties. He's kind of good for like 5 a year outside of that, assuming he plays the whole year. So we've got this very physical corner. Like, doesn't that tell you a style? We've got this guy that likes to be in man-to-man coverage, that likes to play. It's very sticky, very hip-to-hip, be in the receiver's pocket, hand on him, and likes to play a physical style, pushes it a little far sometimes, gets the penalties, right? It's holding penalties, it's PI, it's contact where there's not supposed to be contact. And he's one of those players that likes to push that boundary. Here's the thing, like stylistically, there's a world where that can be worth it. There's plenty of really grabby, handsy, super physical, kind of beat you up corners that play that physical game, and over the course of a game, and it starts to hurt a little bit, it starts to get in the receiver's head. You rough them up a little bit, you can throw them off their game. And depending on the officiating crew, like some crews never call that stuff. Sometimes, and it's, week to week, these crews kind of go back and forth, but depending on the mood you get them in, maybe they're going to call it super loose today and you're going to get away with murder, and then you're going to do some murder. But you get a ref crew that calls it really tight, and it can be super detrimental, right? Obviously you're letting them out of third downs and stuff. And the real thing that gets in your way here, and maybe this is the reason Fabian Moreau hasn't really stuck anywhere. He was Falcon, and then Texans camp, and then Giants, Broncos. And maybe the reason that he hasn't stuck in any of those places is these penalties. In particular, the 2021 year, the year with the Falcons, was the year where he had a bunch of penalties, and now the reputation is ruined, right? And the confidence gets messed up, right? We've talked so much about how important that is for corner. But what can happen is, now that he has that reputation, everybody's going to look for it on tape, see the physicality, and then before every game, they're going to go up to the ref, they're going to go up to the line judge, they're going to go up and talk to everybody and say, hey, watch 39, right? Watch 39's hands, he's going to be holdy. And then everybody's going to call you tight. And now suddenly your whole style falls apart. That's probably what has prevented him from being like a multi-year Falcon, getting cut, being a cat casualty a lot of places. But that is a far cry from this, guys that would have been starting that just haven't started at an NFL starting level, like just have not played up to that level, have always been NFL backups playing like backups, which was kind of what we were flirting with. So Moreau is an upgrade on that. And this is a name that, again, was not on my radar, but probably should have been. So this is, I think, your corner group as it is right now, pending further injury or further trade or whatever. This is the ad I think Kevin O'Connell was talking about. And what we get here now is when Shaq Griffin comes back, who gets bumped off, who gets bumped down to backup. But I think you can probably pencil him in for the roster unless he really falls apart, right? Anybody's a few bad preseason games away from totally, getting kicked to the curb. But the pedigree here implies that this guy's going to have an easy enough time making the team, maybe a harder time getting playing time depending on who's healthy and who's in front of him. But I think considering the circumstances, I think we have to accept as probably one of the best things available to us. And it's not a great situation. Wish we weren't here, but now that we are, I guess you kind of got to take, all right, he's a man quarter. He likes to be sticky. You might get some flags sometimes. We're talking about one flag on average, every 3 to 4 games. That's way too much, but that's not going to ruin your defense as much as a corner that gets torched all the time. Well, so at least we've hopefully papered things over and brought the roster pressure back to the defensive back room that it so needs to weed out some of these guys that are not up to snuff, some of these 2022 draft guys, so that we don't have to do what we had to do on the Vikings last year, which was roster a bunch of undrafted rookies because we just don't really have anybody else. Ivan Pace earned it, but we had a lot of guys making that roster that probably wouldn't have if in a normally built roster. Feels like we're a little bit out of those woods in particular at DB with Moreau. I think he's the ad we were looking for. So we'll be back tomorrow. I think I might do a longer Everyman series tomorrow. And as always, Skol.